Hi everyone, it's August 24th, 2023, and this is the weekly Backdrop Developer Meeting. My name is Nate Lampton. I'm Quick Sketch on the internet, co-founder and technical lead for the Backdrop project. I've got a couple other people here today and we'll do some introductions. We'll start with Jen and then we'll go to Martin.
Jen Lampton, also joining from Oakland, California. Nothing particularly exciting to report, except for that I'm in the middle of a Backdrop upgrade, which is kind of exciting.
Thanks, Jen. Martin and then Olaf.
Hi, I'm Martin Price, Backdrop developer in Northeast England.
Thanks, Martin. With the handle Yorkshire Pudding. You never should miss an opportunity to say your handle.
Yeah, Yorkshire Pudding is how it's pronounced.
Thank you.
Unless you're American.
Okay, Olaf.
I'm Olaf Gorbienski from Hamburg in Germany.
Great, thanks. We also have Justin Christofferson here, who often helps with the infrastructure work on the Backdrop CMS.org infrastructure, but he's away from his desk. So, all right, let's go ahead and get started. So, let's see, Jen, you've got some interesting community and contrib updates in the agenda. Can you go over some of these?
Sure. So let's start with our updates. In the showcase section of the Backdrop CMS.org website, we have a new website. Renee submitted the David Lease blog website, and it's got some beautiful screenshots. So thank you very much for providing that. In terms of new contributors, I don't know this person's real name, Saschuji. I'm sure I'm not getting that right. Ported the Gin admin theme. That's a really big deal because that's a super thing people are super excited about for Drupal. And so the fact that we have it for Backdrop, I think, is pretty cool. So that's a lot of work that went into that. They submitted an application and looks like Greg sent them an invite. So they're able to contribute, which is great.
Yeah,
Just mentioned Laren was heavily involved in that as well.
Great.
Yeah, so looking at his profile, it's Sasha Eggenberger,
Okay.
he's the author of the Gin theme for Drupal.
Oh, nice.
And so he came over, I think, hoping to, I don't know, maybe I know there's a little bit of conflict with the Gin and Claro team, so I don't know. Anyway, that's a really huge undertaking, though, so we really appreciate it. And yeah, looking forward to trying that out.
That might be something and standardizing on. So if they could use it across both platforms, that could be an incentive there too. I don't know. Anyway, very exciting to have it regardless why. Also in the last week, we have 2 new contrib projects added, Catalan countries and agreement. I don't know what agreement module is. Looks like, it's like a checkbox that people have to check before you create an account on the site. Sensible. And then on Wednesday this week, we had 3 contrib security updates. They're not, I think, particularly highly used modules, but it's a big deal because all 3 of those projects had coordinated releases with Drupal. So this was our first chance to go through the process of having a bunch of contrib maintainers added to the Drupal issues, the Drupal security team working on fixes, us collaborating with them on the Drupal fixes, and then us all releasing on the same day. So rather than it just be like a core issue where there's like 1 or 2 of us on it, it involved like a whole slew of people, all of the Backdrop maintainers, all of the Drupal maintainers, both security teams for Drupal and Backdrop. So I don't know, I thought that was kind of noteworthy. And we all got everything out yesterday. So thank you to all of the people who were involved in the Backdrop releases and the Drupal releases. And yeah, I thought it was a great example of us all working together. Just nice.
Yeah, speaking of us all working together, I don't think we've reported out on the meeting that Irina scheduled for us, that you and I coordinated with the Drupal security team, like the leads of the Drupal security team.
I'm not sure how much of that we're allowed to report on.
Okay, well, anyway, we did meet with them. That was a nice, productive meeting, amicable, and just discussed what happens at Drupal 7 end of life and the way that we're going to continue to coordinate. So continue to coordinate, or the ways in which we will cease to coordinate. So Yeah, I guess we can't really report out on any of Drupal's security plans that they haven't already announced, but we have just general ideas and plans for what's going to happen post Drupal 7
Yeah.
end of life, as far as our coordination with the Drupal security team. Anyway, big thanks to the Drupal security team and for Irina for scheduling that for us. So that's very helpful and productive meeting.
Oh, Irina also went through a lot of our security documentation and pointed out some places where things were hard to find or not well documented. So also thank you to her for cleaning all of that up too. So yeah, I think everything's just getting a lot clearer in terms of Backdrop's security, current process and plans for the future, which is great.
Okay, let's see. And you want to go ahead and switch to just general dev issues?
One more thing. Right now, the creation of these meetings every week is done by whoever happens to be around and to run them in any given week. And it would be really great if we could get more people who are capable of doing that. So if Tim, for example, Tim's not around this week, if he's not around, if I'm not around, if Nate's not around, the meeting might not happen. And so it'd be great if we could get more people involved in that so that if people wanted to meet without us, they could. The process is pretty simple. There's a Google Doc template you can copy if you want to. You don't have to use that template if you don't want to, if you just want to have a meeting. And then there's a Zoom, and if you want a live stream of the Zoom. And so we just need to make sure you have access to Google Docs, you have access to the Zoom to be able to share, and then access to the Backdrop live stream account. So if anyone wants that, let us know and we can get you set up.
Okay, great. Well, let's move on to core development. So just timeline-wise, feature freeze for 126 is only 8 days away. So it's on Friday, September 1st, which means that we're really down to the wire here. This isn't going to be a very big release. It doesn't look like, pretty much any way you cut it, we have anything that's on the docket that's going to be a huge thing, especially as far as like major new features are concerned. The biggest headline feature we have for sure is that jQuery is now on the latest version, and all of our libraries, underlying supporting libraries, are all updated and now no longer using any of the old deprecated methods within jQuery. So I think that's a great achievement in itself, just that we're now, it's like one more of our major things that we've been behind on that we can get out from under and really get ourselves modernized. The other thing that is heavy on everybody's minds, I think, is CKEditor, which is also end of life, already officially end of life, and will be even further end of life in November of this year. So this, our September release is the last release of the year. And then the next release after that, which will be 127, will be January 15th, 2024. So this does probably mean that we're going to be looking at a little window here in between November and January where core doesn't ship with a supported version of CKEditor. It's not awesome, but at the same time, Drupal 7 has been carrying on a end-of-life version of jQuery for 5 or 6 years. So so we can manage it, I think, for that little period of time. And yeah, speaking of CKEditor 4, what's the status of that? So the CKEditor 4 module has been moved into the contrib group. It's under Backdrop contrib /CKEditor 5, all one word, CKEditor 5.
Are we going to have a CKEditor 4 module also for when we move to 5 if people want 4?
What will happen in core is that the CKEditor module, as it exists now, it will live in the namespace of CKEditor. We'll probably label it CKEditor 4 in the info file.
Okay.
And CKEditor 4 will continue to live in core for a while yet.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that's a 2.x thing, but it'll be disabled on new sites, but it'll continue to exist on sites because unlike Drupal, which has major versions, and they've just removed the old CK editor module, because we don't have a major version on the near horizon that would be able to drop an entire module, because that'd be a major compatibility break. Our version will just continue to live in core as CK editor module. Go ahead, Olaf.
Yeah, one question. Did we ever discuss to put CK editor 5 in core already in September in a not stable state? Maybe even to hide it for this moment, but to have the option in November to enable it in a better version that is at least so stable that people can don't have to install a contributed module to get official support. Did we ever discuss that?
We have discussed adding a status report message saying that you should use the install the contrib module. I don't think that there's been any progress on that particular concept yet. But I don't think we have discussed the idea of just putting what we have into core. I have a little bit of hesitance around that because it's not really ready yet, especially if we're going to get this in the next week. Like, that seems like that's rushing things a bit.
So I'm just wondering how many APIs we have around the editor. Are there a lot because of the like image modal and stuff in terms of like, if we put it in, are we going to break the APIs between September and January because that's what would make it definitely not a good idea to put in if we're still changing those, because then if people start depending on them and pull them out.
Yeah, the current implementation has no impact on core whatsoever, because that's why it can function as a contrib module, because it doesn't change anything in core. It uses all of the existing APIs and systems in core without any modification.
Have its own that like the CK editor height module or something is
okay. Yeah, I could see that happening, that like the way that CK editor plugins are processed, like adding an additional plugin, that could very easily change. But I think what Olaf is suggesting is that we basically put it into core as an unstable module just so that it's there. And so just by having the moniker unstable, which we haven't done this before, but having the moniker unstable in core, we could put a little note on the module description saying, you know, this module is subject to change, and that would kind of free us from our backwards compatibility obligations, I think, for this special window of time. I don't know. What do you guys think?
In general, I like it because I feel like there are people who are running checkers against their site to make sure that everything's up to date, and they're already hitting problems with like jQuery, just reporting the version number being problematic. And I think that, you know, we fixed the jQuery problem, but as soon as CK editor reaches end of life, we're now going to be like, okay, well, now we've got something that we actually know we haven't done anything to, could possibly have vulnerabilities in it. And I think for those people, if they want to just turn off CK editor and turn on CK editor 5 for between November and January, that might alleviate their issues with their routine scans of their site. I think they're definitely capable of installing the contrib module and doing that, but having it in core, I think, gives a little more credibility to Backdrop itself. It's like, we're not depending on the community to provide this. Backdrop itself is providing it. I know in this case, it's the same people, but I think just the impression is a little different, where it's like, oh, it's in there, it's coming, gives them a little more confidence than like, oh, well, it's just this random contrib project that solved the problem for us. So yeah, I like the idea. I wonder about the implications of it. Like, I feel like if it's in core, are all of the like add-on modules going to start updating before it's stable? And then in January, are we going to break them all? And I don't know that how many there are. I know there's at least 2 for Backdrop, but there could be 10 that I don't know about. But it might be worth looking at and seeing if what kind of implementations they have and if there's a risk of that. Because I know CK Editor 5 is drastically different from 4. And so there's a lot we're changing in order to just keep up with CK Editor. And I don't know how that is going to trickle down to our own modules.
Yeah, my biggest concern is around issue management that and just like development workflow, that when something is in contrib, like it's funny because I'm managing both of these things, but the process that we have for core is more stricter. It's made to deliver a stable product at all times, and so we often get really, we're real sticklers about making sure everything is finished by the time it gets merged in. And there's also like, somebody reviews the pull request before it goes in. And in Contribland, especially with a module that doesn't even have a release yet, now obviously it should have a release, but the idea of like filing a pull request and then self-merging it is the commonplace, that it's like the author is usually the only person working on the project directly. And so I would be uncomfortable just bringing that workflow to core, that I would file a pull request and self-merge it. Like, I feel like that's a bad precedent for any of us to start doing.
Yeah, I understand. And I didn't know of the idea with the status report message, and think that's also a good option. So yeah, we should remind to do that, and then I'm fine with that.
I'm gonna file an issue real quick if we don't have that already. Backdrop issues.
Would it be a warning or an error? Just a warning.
Probably
But-
just a warning,
Error would make the red dot show up, which could be annoying for people
Mhm.
for the 2 months.
because you couldn't get rid of it other than installing an unstable module that might
Yeah.
not work for you.
Yeah.
So
And it might cause content loss. So I think probably warnings.
add support for secondary 5. Okay, so we have this issue. Well, let's just add another one. Feature request. Okay. Okay, I don't actually have time to write the whole issue, but I'm gonna open a window with the form partially filled out that I won't close.
That's how it's done.
Yeah, that's how it's done. Okay, let's see. Other things in CK Editor news. Indigo Zala has been hopped into the Backdrop Contrib project issue queue and has been working on generic HTML support, which is a huge area that needs some help. And so it looks like she has a pull request. It just generally gets the generic HTML plugin enabled and configured. So that's a big start in itself. She does say there's a number of other weird issues still around, like switching from CK Editor 4 to 5, but those are separate issues that we're also tracking. Yeah, well, anyway, that's still coming along. I think the big thing here, though, is that CK Editor 5, I mean, some of these things are pretty big issues. Like, you can't switch from one editor to another editor, CK Editor 4 to 5, without throwing PHP errors. Some of these things need to be resolved before we can even make like an alpha release. But a release is definitely a good idea, just to get it into the project browser, which will dramatically increase its visibility from being like a project with no releases in the Backdrop Contrib group. So, and that'll get it a node on backdropcms.org, and yeah, just generally surface it a lot better. I think that's all I've got for the updates on CK Editor 5. Looks like, Jen, you may have added another item to the agenda here about text filter abilities, attribute support. Is that
Yeah,
your
so that
item?
was what we were talking about at the beginning of the meeting, where in Drupal, you can specify the name of the HTML element and then any given attributes you want allowed on that element. And I find that a very useful feature in the world of Drupal. And in Drupal 7, all
Speaking of
attributes were stripped by default. And
Also-
so the only way you could get attributes on your content was to either allow like no text filtering at all, so allow everything, or install a contrib module that gave you that granular control. And I know that we have special attributes that are allowed on things like images that are embedded into our text areas. And I was wondering if the support for those was added as part of CKEditor module into our filter system. And if so, what other things are we allowed to do that people coming from Drupal 7 might not know about? So in testing, Indigo Zella put a class attribute on something and it remained. And in general, in the world of attributes, like classes are almost always safe. So I was like, maybe we put a like whitelist for or allow list for classes. But are there like what other attributes are allowed? And so it would be good if we could document that somewhere, maybe not necessarily inside Backdrop, but as like a change record or something, just so that people know. I had created an issue because assuming there wasn't any of that in there, and people are like, I'm testing it and it works. Do we have this? And I'm like, I don't know how much we have. But yeah, just so we can kind of figure out where we're at with attribute support in our filter system.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't think that we're much different than Drupal 7. Like we allow a tag list, and then there's a specific block list of some attributes that aren't allowed anywhere. Anything that starts with on, for example, on change, on click, whatever, that always gets stripped out. And the script tag always gets stripped out. But other than that, like all attributes are allowed and not stripped on output from Backdrop's filtering system. Is that not the experience that you have, or?
I don't think so. I need to go look up which site I was working on when I filed that issue. But I think I remember finding that things weren't allowed and being like, oh, we should allow these. And that's why I filed the issue.
Okay, so there's a different issue in that what Backdrop's filtering system allows. This is another, like, this doesn't seem like it's the way it should be, but what Backdrop's filtering system allows is different than what CKEditor allows in some situations. And
but
so,
I know that CKEditor uses specific attributes, and so I was wondering if that was the reason that we might be allowing specific attributes. Like, for example, you can't use the align attribute anymore. You need a style attribute in order to like text align your text. And so I was like, does that mean that because in Drupal, style is bad because you can put a like background image that could have a reference to something malicious. And so it's like a question of how do we manage those attributes. And so I didn't know if there was like a specific change we made in order to accommodate what CKEditor needed to do with HTML5 stuff.
Yeah, I think, both, and any changes that we have right now are mostly in CKEditor, like regarding the attributes that it allows. There's very little that is different between the filter system and Drupal 7 and Backdrop regarding the like stripping out of tags or stripping out of attributes. The integration point between editors and filters is kind of interesting in that it is currently set up in a way where when you drag a button into the CKEditor toolbar, like let's say you drag in an image, then the API provided by Core to update the filters does support both tags and attributes. And so when you drag in a button, you can say also enable the alt tag and the title tag and the source tag, or sorry, attribute for all those things on images and strip everything else out. And the CKEditor 4 module doesn't provide a tag list. The CKEditor 5 module does provide a tag list because the capability was there, and it's like, it's best to get prepared for this. And so the CKEditor 5 module is now sending a list to Core of saying these attributes and these tags, which is different. It's just that when the filter module receives the list, it just only cares about the tags because it doesn't have support for the attributes at this point. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting problem to face. Again, this comes into like the generic HTML support. Like what happens when you have that on legacy data? Because in CKEditor 5, you can tell it to just allow all attributes and all tags, but it behaves weird, as opposed to the way it's intended to work, where it really only knows how to handle certain attributes and certain tags, and they need to be very specifically like these attributes and these tags, and other stuff is intended to get stripped out by the nature of the way the CKEditor 5 is written. So it's funny because having more granularity as with CKEditor 5 is kind of both a good and bad thing. And that like if you added additional attributes to CKEditor 5 without a plugin to support them, like if you could add something else like a data attribute or something like that to an image tag, CKEditor 5 wouldn't know what to do with it, and might, I don't know how this worked, but I would guess that it would discard that information. So even if it was allowed in the filter, CKEditor, the library, still would probably strip it out. I don't know.
Don't all of our images have that problem because they all have the image ID in the data attribute?
Yep, they do have that problem, but that's why there's a plugin provided by provided by the CKEditor 5 module that says when you encounter a data align attribute, this is what it does, and so preserve that.
FID.
Yeah, and FID. Yeah. All those data attributes. In order for them to really work with CKEditor 5, my understanding is that you also need to have a plugin that does something with those attributes, preserves it, and then restores it.
Just leave it alone, leave it there, don't do anything. That's probably, it needs to know about it.
Yeah, exactly. And again, this might be what generic HTML support, it might help with this, but I think it might also not, in that if a tag is supported by a plugin, like the image tag is, it might not support other arbitrary attributes that the generic HTML support plugin does. So I don't know, it requires a little bit more experimentation to figure out exactly what would happen there.
So I have one more question about CKEditor and filtering. In Drupal, when they switched to CKEditor 4 to CKEditor 5, the allowed tags list became locked on any format that had.
Oh, it does?
Yeah.
Oh,
you cannot change your allowed tags or class or attributes.
That's funny because that's what I was basically saying, is that like, because if you added extra attributes, they would just get stripped out by the editor by default. Yeah.
And if you try, and I think there's even a description on it that says like the tags and attributes are defined by your editor settings and cannot be changed here. And so that can be really frustrating if you, for example, like you need to embed an iframe, but you don't have a plugin for it in your editor now. And so that means if you ever edit that content again, your iframe is going to be removed. Where it's like, I just want you to just ignore it. It would be nice if there was like a ignore it plugin or something. But it sounds like that might be what generic HTML filter will do for it. Yeah, that would be great. Okay. So how are we also going to make that field disabled for Backdrop?
We don't know yet. Okay. I hadn't really thought that we would. I think that might be a recent addition, because the early versions of CKEditor 5 and the ones that I've looked at don't include that capability. So it looks like that might be a recent change to things.
Yeah, I think it is. It might even be in one of the patches we're running in order to support functionality.
Yeah. What I have been thinking about doing as far as generic HTML support is that it's possible that this should be an option that you enable as an editor, rather than being on all the time. Because if you leave it off for more limited scenarios, you're going to get a lot better, cleaner markup. If you copy and paste from Word or something, or from another thing, if you have it off, it's going to strip out all of the markup that it doesn't know how to support, which would be a good thing in most situations. But it's really only if you have a lot of content that maybe you, did like some, like if you had a page content type in which you did extensive markup with divs and things like that, you actually did layout inside of your WYSIWYG editor, that would be a situation in which you probably want to have generic HTML support enabled.
So are you thinking there could be like a checkbox on the editor configuration that would be like generic HTML support, yes, no, and we could like enable that or leave it off, no support for like the basic format, but if somebody wanted a more advanced format, they could create one and turn it on and add that kind of, yeah, okay, that sounds good.
Yep.
And then if that checkbox was checked, we could even do something like make the tags filtered, allowed tags, whatever the field is, blocked, but then that way it wouldn't be blocked for most people because that, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, you also could do other kinds of coupling things where it's like, if you don't have the filter turned on, the tag filter turned on, then generic HTML support would be required, like, because otherwise it's not going to work at all.
Yep. Yeah.
Really. Yeah. And it might be one of these things where it also is turned on by default for existing sites, but turned off on new installs.
Yeah, I like that.
Again, even though I would say that having it on is not a best practice already, but
neither is having an editor on your unfiltered format. So I think that makes sense. Like the people who have that use case, having the ability to do it is there. So yeah, I like it. This is great. Thank you for talking through that with me.
About the plan. Yeah, the plan is great. Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Olaf. Oh, you're muted. Sorry.
So yeah, so I think, however, the tricky thing is that without the generic HTML support, if you have just, for example, a pre-tag, so such thing, which is not a very exhaustive or something, it gets stripped out as soon as you open the editor. So it doesn't get stripped out when you save the content, but already before. And it's not clear that people note that. And so that's so dangerous, in my opinion. And for that reason, we should consider to, in a way, at least a basic version have enabled of this, so that people don't lose anything.
Yeah, I think that's what Nate was saying. All existing sites have it enabled, and that way any existing content will be preserved. But then for people who are creating new sites with new content, they hopefully won't end up in that situation. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mentioned this also as like a pie in the sky functionality. Something that bothers me about the way that Drupal handles changing in text formats is that if you make any change to the text format, you change from one select list to the other, it gives you this big scary error saying changing text formats could result in content loss. But a lot of times it doesn't, like it just like gives you this warning. And pie in the sky feature would be, we can get the current value of the text area prior to the editor being attached. And then the editor can be attached, and then we can ask the editor, what's the value of the text field now? And then we can compare them and see if any data loss occurred, and then show them an error saying, switching this editor has caused some tags to be lost, like please review your content before saving. And that would be the best thing, I think, even though maybe it wouldn't give you the warning before you change the text format, but it would give you the warning if you just loaded the editor without doing anything. I think that's important to notify the user right then at that point.
Yeah,
that is
before they save it and then have lost their content. Yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah, the Drupal approach only happens on changing text formats, but really we kind of want to do it when it attaches, so that it can tell you if data loss has occurred. Yeah,
that's great.
Good. Yeah,
I think that would help. That would help a lot.
and by the way, Jen, regarding the other issue which you mentioned with the data attributes and so on, I also looked at it, and I think At the moment, we don't have documented what works and what not. And I think it would also help for CK Editor 5 to document it. So maybe we should go to the other issue which you mentioned and test all the attributes and classes and tags and so on, so that we know also how to handle that in CK Editor 5.
Yeah, I think if Nate's correct in that we do it the same way Drupal does it, there should be a list somewhere in core that's like, these are allowed, and that would make it very easy to document. We could just copy that list and be like, this is what's allowed. If we don't have a list, we're gonna have to do a lot of testing and figure it out.
Yeah, we have to verify it. Yeah.
I'm almost certain that it's a block list, not an allow list of attributes. So all attributes are allowed except for certain ones.
Mm.
I'm not sure if style is in there or not. I think style is allowed by default, like the style attribute, which is problematic for a lot of sites because it lets you do just about everything. Yeah. All right. Let's see other items on the agenda. Let's see. We have Martin raised issue 6199. Of course, Martin may have left his computer here, but we'll just mention this real quickly that 6199 is the issue to remove the interest cohort header. That this was kind of a failed scheme by Google to start tracking people across websites. And they abandoned the campaign entirely. And so this header no longer does anything. It actually didn't do anything in the first place. It was about to do something. It was a big rebellion, and then Google backed down from their proposal. So issue 6199 is just to remove that one. We discussed before the meeting that we already have a change record for when it was added. And rather than a second change record that could be in conflict with the first one, we probably should just go back and update the original change record as saying, like, this thing was added, but then it was removed, just to keep all of that in one location. Let's see. I think that's kind of it for today. Let's talk about the 126 milestone real quick. Trying to get to it. So yeah, we've got the jQuery updates. We've got the deprecated jQuery methods have been removed. Let's see, and then there's the allow external or internal links to be reviewed. Olaf is now the advocate for that issue, and I moved it into the 126 milestone. Current state of things looks like it basically just needs review. It's been marked works for me. It needs code review. Oh, it needs automated tests. Classic. So possible, with 1 week, like that could very likely be completed in that time frame. Let's see, that issue is 5678. I also know Gregory was trying to do some work on, oh gosh, I can't remember. The debugging data page. He wants to make a status report page that just provides information about your Backdrop website that you can copy and paste. I don't have the issue number for that one, but that one's not outside the realm of possibility either. It just creates a page callback that lists like your PHP version, your MySQL version, your Backdrop version, stuff that could be useful information for people that are reporting issues to the Backdrop issue queue. Let's see, looks like, actually, Martin, you also have this user role has permission issue. Looks like it was just happening this week, 6186. This one's marked RTBC. That's great. Just a new utility function.
Yeah, just came across the need for it in a module I was porting, and well, I ended up writing it in the module and then thought this would be a good addition to course. So put
Mhm.
it in. A few people agreed. So
Cool. Okay. Well, I think let's. Do you guys have any other topics you'd like to discuss? Okay. Well, let's wrap it up for today. Just generally, I want to put it out there that we've been under, like, our household has been under a little bit of duress recently, and that'll go through this weekend. So unfortunately, we don't really have the time availability to put in any extra effort this particular release cycle. This is an opportunity for other people on our leadership team to step up if they feel so inclined, including our core committers, to work with getting some of these issues merged in before the feature freeze next week. But as always, like, you know, we're always appreciative of all of the effort that all of our community members have put in, and also respectful of people that need a break and the backdrop isn't their life. And so we're always appreciative for all of the efforts that people have, and giving us, you know, the time out of their lives to make our software better. So half apology, half thank you. Hope everybody's okay. All right, let's close out for today. So thank you so much, and we'll talk to everybody next week. Next week will be the day before feature freeze, so we'll still have one more meeting before that happens. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.